A single text message, just 2 words, arrives on the phone of a powerful CEO. It's done. The message is from his wife, Annalise Thorne. Moments later, her phone goes dead, her social media vanishes, and she disappears from the face of the earth. For 3 agonizing weeks, her husband, Marcus Thorne, is grilled by police, vilified by the media, and haunted by the question, what was done? He thinks it's about their fractured marriage, a secret he's been keeping. He's wrong. On the 21st day of her disappearance, the answer arrives not from a detective, but from a press release. His billion-dollar company, Ethelred Innovations, has filed for catastrophic bankruptcy, and the trail of destruction leads directly back to his missing wife. Marcus Thorne lived his life at an altitude of 200 feet. Not just figuratively, as the CEO of Ethelred Innovations, a logistics and tech giant he'd built from the ground up, but literally. His office was the penthouse floor of the Thorne Tower in downtown Chicago, a monument of steel and smoked glass that speared the clouds. From here, the city was a silent, sprawling circuit board, and he was its master programmer. The world was a series of problems to be solved by capital code and ruthless efficiency. On Tuesday, October 15th, the world was humming along perfectly. Ethelred's stock was up 3 points. A lucrative government contract was in its final stages, and the autumn sun cast long golden shadows across his minimalist Italian desk. He was reviewing quarterly projections, the neat columns of black figures a comforting testament to his control, when his personal phone buzzed. He glanced at it, annoyed by the interruption. It was from Annalise. Just 2 words. It's done. Marcus frowned. The message was stark devoid of the usual emojis or affectionate sign-offs she used even when she was annoyed with him. It was cold, clinical. Done. What was done? He mentally scrolled through their recent conversations. They'd had a fight that morning, a familiar circular argument about his work hours. He'd promised to be home early for dinner, a promise he was already planning to break. Was this her sarcastic confirmation? Dinner is done and you're not here? It felt more significant than that. He typed back a quick reply. What's done? I'm in a meeting. A lie, but a necessary one to maintain the fiction of his indispensability. No response. He waited a minute, then another. The silence on the other end of the line felt unnervingly loud. He dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail, not even a single ring. The recorded message was her voice, warm and smooth like honey. Hi, you've reached Annalise. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you soon. The cheerful normalcy of it was suddenly jarring. He tried her office line. Annalise wasn't just his wife. She was the COO of Ethelred, the organizational backbone to his visionary chaos. Her assistant, a young, perpetually flustered woman named Portia, answered. Portia, is Annalise with you? No, Mr. Thorne. She left about an hour ago, said she had a personal errand to run. Did she say where? No, sir. She just packed up her briefcase and left. She seemed very focused. Focused. Another strange word. Annalise was always composed, but focused implied a mission. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He ended the call and tried her mobile again, straight to voicemail. He pulled up the Find My Phone app they shared. Her phone's location was a gray dot last seen an hour ago at her office. It was offline. Panic, a foreign and unwelcome emotion, began to prickle at the edges of his composure. This wasn't like her. Annalise was the most reliable person he knew. She was meticulous, a planner. She didn't just go offline. He spent the next 2 hours in a state of escalating anxiety, calling her number every 10 minutes, checking his email, his texts, even their shared social media accounts. Nothing. It was around 5 p.m., the city lights beginning to glitter below, that he noticed something else. Her Instagram, usually filled with artistic shots of architecture and pictures from their charity galas, was gone. Not private, but gone. A search for her name yielded a user not found error. Her Facebook profile had also vanished. It was as if she was digitally erasing herself. The knot in his stomach turned to a block of ice. This wasn't a dead battery or a forgotten phone. This was a deliberate act. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly in the silent office. The city lights blinked up at him, suddenly seeming less like a kingdom and more like a vast, indifferent wilderness. He called his driver. "Take me home, now." The ride to their Lincoln Park brownstone was a blur of traffic and dread. He kept replaying the two words in his head. It's done. It was a statement of finality. The end of something. Their marriage. Had she finally had enough? The thought was both terrifying and, in a deeply buried part of his heart, understandable. He had been a peripheral figure in their marriage for years, a provider of luxury but not of presence. He loved her, of course he did. But his first love, his true addiction, was the company. He burst through the front door of their meticulously decorated home. Annalise. The house was silent. Everything was in its place. The mail was stacked neatly on the hall table. A vase of white lilies, her favorite, sat on the marble countertop in the kitchen, their scent thick in the air. Nothing seemed amiss, yet the absence of her presence was a physical weight. He ran upstairs to their bedroom. Her closet was open. A section was empty. Not all of it, but a curated selection of her clothes was gone. Her travel suitcase was also missing. On her side of the bed, her jewelry box was open. The everyday pieces were there, but the truly valuable items, the diamond necklace he'd bought her for their 10th anniversary, her grandmother's emerald ring, were gone. On his pillow was a single plain white envelope. His name, Marcus, was written on it in her elegant, familiar script. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The divorce papers. The letter explaining everything. He tore it open with trembling hands. It was empty. Just a blank folded piece of high-quality stationery. A final baffling gesture. What did it mean? That there was nothing left to say? That he was supposed to fill in the blanks himself? It was cruel. It was maddening. It was so unlike the direct, articulate woman he had married. He sank onto the bed, the empty envelope in his hand, the silence of the house pressing in on him. Annalise was gone. She had packed a bag, taken her most valuable possessions, sent a cryptic final message, and vanished. At 9:42 p.m., after calling every friend, every relative, every spa and hotel he could think of, Marcus Thorne, the man who controlled a global empire, did the one thing he never thought he'd do. He called the Chicago Police Department and reported his wife as a missing person. The call felt like a surrender, an admission that for the first time in his adult life, he was utterly and completely out of control. The first 48 hours were a procedural whirlwind that did little to calm Marcus's fraying nerves. 2 uniformed officers took his initial statement, their expressions a practiced blend of sympathy and professional detachment. They walked through the house, their heavy boots scuffing the polished hardwood floors, their presence a violation of the private sanctuary Annalise had so carefully curated. On the third day, Detective Evelyn Reed arrived. She was a woman in her late 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and a no-nonsense demeanor that was immune to the aura of wealth and power that usually surrounded Marcus. She didn't seem impressed by the soaring ceilings or the abstract art on the walls. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice gravelly as she sat opposite him in his living room, refusing the offer of coffee. "Let's go over this one more time. Your wife Annalise Thorne, age 41. She leaves her office Tuesday afternoon. Sends you a text message at 3:15 p.m. that says, 'It's done.' Then she disappears. You find some of her clothes and expensive jewelry missing, and an empty envelope on your pillow. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's all of it." Marcus was exhausted. He hadn't slept. He'd been fielding calls from his board of directors, from concerned friends, and now from the media who were starting to get wind of the story. "It's done," Reed repeated, tapping her pen on her notepad. "What do you think she meant by that?" "Mr. Thorne, I told you I think she was leaving me," he said, the admission tasting like ash in his mouth. "We'd been having problems." "What kind of problems?" Reed's gaze was unwavering. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "The usual. My work. I travel a lot. I'm not home as much as I should be. Were there other people involved, on your side or hers? No. Marcus said a little too quickly. Absolutely not. It was a lie. A partial one at least. There had been no physical affair, but there was Corinne. Corinne was a junior analyst at Ethelred, bright, ambitious, and starstruck by him. Over the past 6 months, their late nights working on the government contract had bled into long conversations. He'd shared frustrations about his marriage. She'd listened with wide-eyed sympathy. There were lunches that felt a little too much like dates texts that were a little too familiar. He'd been careless, seeking an ego boost, a distraction. He knew Annalise suspected something, though she never said it outright. There was a coolness that had settled between them, a distance that his work-life excuse couldn't fully explain. But he was sure Annalise had never had an affair. She was loyalty personified. Detective Reed seemed to sense the evasion. We'll be looking at phone records, credit card statements, Mr. Thorne. Both yours and hers. If there's something to find, we'll find it. It's better if it comes from you. There's nothing to find, he insisted, his tone hardening. The investigation ground on. Reed's team was thorough. They discovered that Annalise had withdrawn $50,000 in cash from their joint account on the morning she disappeared. A significant sum, but hardly enough to start a new life in luxury. It was enough, however, to fuel the narrative that she had left voluntarily. They also discovered that 6 weeks prior, Annalise had met with a high-profile divorce attorney, Beatrice Kent. When questioned, Kent cited attorney-client privilege but confirmed a consultation had taken place. The pieces were slotting into a neat, simple picture for the police. A wealthy, unhappy wife plans her escape from a workaholic, possibly unfaithful husband. By the end of the first week, the story had exploded in the press. Tech billionaire's wife vanishes after draining bank account. Marcus's face was everywhere, grim and unsmiling. Paparazzi camped outside his home and office. Ethelred's PR department went into overdrive, issuing statements about their concern for Annalise and their support for their CEO, but the damage was done. The stock, his barometer of success, dipped. Then it dipped further. Marcus felt trapped in a nightmare of his own making. His private life, which he had always guarded so fiercely, was now public spectacle. Every strained conversation, every missed dinner, was being re-examined through a lens of suspicion. He became a prisoner in his own home. The silence of the house a constant screaming reminder of Annalise's absence. He would walk into her study untouched since she left and see the book she was reading, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. It was torment. His business partner and CFO, Desmond Vance, tried to be a pillar of support. Desmond had been with him from the beginning. He was a steady, numbers-driven man who offset Marcus's impulsive genius. Just focus on weathering this. Marcus. Desmond set his hand on Marcus's shoulder during a tense meeting. The company needs you to be strong. We can handle the press. Just tell me, is there anything else that's going to come out? Any other surprises? Marcus thought of Corinne. No, he lied again to his oldest friend. There's nothing. He was a fool. The second week brought a seismic shift in the investigation, and it came as Marcus had feared, in the form of Corinne. Detective Reed's team, armed with warrants, had pulled his phone records. The late-night texts, the frequent calls to a number not listed as a business contact. It didn't take a genius to connect the dots. Corinne was brought in for questioning. Terrified and weeping, she told them everything. She detailed the long conversations, the shared complaints, the undeniable emotional intimacy. She insisted it had never become physical, but she admitted that Marcus had spoken ill of his wife, that he'd called their marriage a gilded cage. When Detective Reed next confronted Marcus, her professional sympathy was gone, replaced by a cold prosecutorial focus. They were in a sterile interview room at the police precinct, a place Marcus had only ever seen in movies. A gilded cage, Mr. Thorne, Reed asked, sliding a transcript of Corinne's interview across the table. Doesn't sound like the usual problems you described to me. Marcus's blood ran cold. I was venting. It didn't mean anything. It means you lied to a police investigation. It means you have a motive. Your unhappy wife was about to leave you, likely taking half of your fortune with her. What did you do, Mr. Thorne? Did you have one last argument on Tuesday? Did things get out of hand? That's insane. Marcus shot to his feet. I did not harm my wife. I love my wife. Sit down. Reed's voice cracked like a whip. You love her so much you were having an emotional affair with a subordinate half your age. You love her so much you lied to the people trying to find her. Right now, Mr. Thorne, your story is the only one we have. And it's falling apart. The narrative had changed. He was no longer the worried husband. He was the cheating husband, the lying husband. And in the court of public opinion, he was quickly becoming the guilty husband. News outlets ran side-by-side photos of the beautiful, smiling Annalise and the young, tearful Corinne. The headlines were brutal CEO's secret affair, exposed as wife remains missing. Did Marcus Thorne's betrayal lead to foul play? The pressure was immense. Ethelred's board of directors called an emergency meeting. They stood by him for now, but their faces were grim. The government contract, once a sure thing, was suddenly on hold pending a review of the company's leadership stability. Marcus felt the empire he had built beginning to tremble. He was isolated. His friends called less frequently, their conversations strained and awkward. He was toxic. He hired a high-powered criminal defense attorney, a move that he knew made him look even more guilty, but one he had no choice but to make. He spent his nights alone in the cavernous house, drinking expensive scotch and staring at photos of Annalise. He saw her smile, the intelligent light in her eyes, and was overwhelmed by a tidal wave of regret. He had taken her for granted. He had been a fool, chasing the validation of the market and the thrill of the deal while the most valuable asset in his life was quietly slipping away. He'd thought the problem was her unhappiness with him. He had never once considered that the problem might be something else entirely. He started doing his own digging, fueled by desperation and insomnia. He accessed Annalise's work computer, her files. She was the COO. She had her hand in everything. He didn't know what he was looking for. A clue, a breadcrumb, anything. Her files were like her, impeccably organized. There were folders for operations logistics personnel, and one folder password protected named Valkyrie. He tried every password he could think of: her birthday, their anniversary, her mother's maiden name, the name of their first dog. Nothing worked. The file was a digital lockbox, and he didn't have the key. Whatever secret it held, she had taken it with her. The third week began. 20 days since he'd last seen her. The police were no closer to finding her. The media speculation had reached a fever pitch. Marcus Thorne was no longer a CEO. He was a character in a true crime drama, and everyone was waiting for the final damning act. He felt like he was standing on a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath his feet. He had no idea he was about to be pushed. On the morning of the 21st day, a Tuesday, exactly 3 weeks since Annalise's disappearance, Marcus was preparing for another grueling session with his lawyers when his phone rang. It was Desmond Vance, his CFO. His voice was strained, panicked. "Marcus, you need to get down to the office. Now. All hell has broken loose. What is it? What's happened?" "It's a liquidity crisis, a massive one. The banks are calling in our credit lines. They're saying we've defaulted on our covenants. I don't understand the numbers, Marcus. They're not adding up." Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline cut through his exhausted haze. This was his territory. A financial crisis was a problem he could understand, a dragon he could slay. "I'm on my way." When he walked into the Ethelred boardroom, the atmosphere was funereal. The entire executive board was present, their faces pale. Desmond stood at the head of the table, his tie loose and sweating despite the cool temperature of the room. He was pointing at a series of complex spreadsheets projected onto a large screen. "It happened overnight," Desmond explained, his voice trembling. "A series of offshore transfers were triggered. Huge sums, Marcus. Hundreds of millions of dollars moved from our primary reserve accounts to an untraceable shell corporation in the Cayman Islands." Marcus stared at the screen, his mind racing to catch up. "Who authorized the transfers? That requires dual sign-off. Mine and... He trailed off, the blood draining from his face. And Annalise's Desmond finished, his voice barely a whisper. Her digital signature was used. The transfers were initiated from her encrypted work laptop at 3:45 p.m. 3 weeks ago, right after she left the office. The room fell silent. The date, the time, it was all clicking into place with sickening clarity. The text message. It's done. It wasn't about their marriage. It wasn't about dinner. It was about this. She had gutted the company. The transfer triggered an immediate automated audit by our lenders. Desmond continued, his voice regaining some strength as he slipped into the role of the bearer of bad news. They found irregularities, discrepancies in our asset valuations going back years, over-leveraged positions, inflated revenue projections. The house of cards just fell. Marcus was reeling. Inflated projections. That's not possible. You and I review the financials every month. Desmond looked away, unable to meet his eyes. The numbers I saw were solid. The numbers the bank saw, they tell a different story. It looks like we've been running on fumes for years, using new investments to cover old debts. A classic Ponzi scheme. A murmur of shock went through the room. A Ponzi scheme. Ethelred Innovations was his life's work, a legitimate, profitable enterprise. This is a mistake, Marcus said, his voice shaking with rage. Someone has manipulated the books. Someone framed us. One of the board members, an old hawk-faced man named Alistair Finch, spoke up. The person who framed us appears to be your wife, Marcus. She initiated the final fatal transfer, and then she vanished. It looks like she took the money and ran, exposing the rod as she went. The logic was undeniable, yet it made no sense. Why would Annalise do this to ruin him? It was beyond vengeance. It was scorched earth destruction. It would destroy her own reputation, make her an international fugitive. It was illogical. It was insane. Before he could argue further, his corporate lawyer burst into the room. We have a problem. The SEC has just announced they are launching a formal investigation into Ethelred for securities fraud. They're on their way here with a warrant to seize all our servers. The final nail in the coffin. That afternoon, under the advice of a battalion of lawyers, Ethelred Innovations, the titan of industry, the symbol of Marcus Thorne's success, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The news hit the wires like a thunderclap. The stock plummeted to zero in after-hours trading. The company he had spent 20 years building was gone in a single day. The media narrative, already hostile, became venomous. It was a story too perfect to resist the cheating CEO and his scorned, brilliant wife, who in a final act of revenge stole a fortune and burned his empire to the ground on her way out the door. Marcus Thorne was no longer just a suspect in his wife's disappearance. He was the villain of a grand corporate tragedy, a fraudster whose personal sins had led to financial ruin for thousands of employees and investors. He watched the news that night from the floor of his empty living room, a bottle of scotch his only companion. His face was plastered on every channel. Pundits dissected his downfall with gleeful schadenfreude. His company was bankrupt. His reputation was destroyed. He was the subject of a federal investigation. He had lost everything. And it was all because of Annalise. The hatred he felt was pure and searing. How could she do this? He stumbled through the house in a drunken rage, wanting to smash something, to destroy something the way she had destroyed him. He ended up in her study, the one room he'd avoided. He swept his arm across her desk, sending papers, pens, and a framed photo of the two of them smiling on a beach in Italy, crashing to the floor. As he stared at the wreckage, his eye caught something. Underneath the heavy desk blotter where it had been hidden was a small silver key. It was a key he recognized. It belonged to the small fireproof safe hidden behind a false panel in the wall, the one where they kept their passports and important documents. With a surge of desperate hope, he pried open the panel and unlocked the safe. Inside were their passports, some emergency cash, and a thick sealed manila envelope. On the front, in Annalise's handwriting, were the words, "For Marcus. When it's all gone." His hands shaking so badly he could barely function, he ripped it open. It wasn't money. It was a stack of papers and a single USB stick. On top was a handwritten letter. He began to read. My dearest Marcus, if you are reading this, it means I have failed. Or perhaps it means I have succeeded. By now the company is gone. Your name is mud. You hate me. And the entire world is telling you that you are right to. Please, before you believe, then believe me. Read what is in this envelope. Look at the drive. And understand that everything I did to save you. Part 5. The Valkyrie's Gambit. Marcus sank to the floor, the letter trembling in his hand. The words made no sense. Save you? She had annihilated him. He read on his mind, struggling to process the elegant looping script that was so at odds with the chaos she had unleashed. For 2 years, my love, you have been blind. You saw only the stock price, the next contract, the view from your tower. You didn't see the rot spreading through the foundations of the very thing you built. I tried to tell you. I tried to show you the small inconsistencies in the quarterly reports, the numbers that felt slick, too perfect. 2. You told me I was being overly cautious. You told me to trust Desmond. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Desmond. His friend, his partner, the man who had stood by his side, feigning panic in the boardroom. Desmond has been stealing from you from the company for at least 5 years. Not in large, obvious amounts, but a slow, methodical bleed. He's a genius, I'll give him that. He created a shadow accounting system, a ghost ledger that mirrored our own, but with tiny fractional alterations. He siphoned money into a web of shell corporations so complex it would take a team of forensic accountants a year to unravel. But the hole was getting bigger. The company wasn't as healthy as you thought. We were leveraged to the hilt based on asset valuations that Desmond had been carefully inflating for years. Marcus's head swam. He grabbed the stack of papers from the envelope. They were printouts of spreadsheets, flowcharts of transactions, copies of documents. It was meticulous. It was damning. He saw account numbers, dates, names of shell companies, Njord Holdings, Freya Investments. It was all there. Annalise had been running her own secret parallel investigation for months. The password-protected folder on her computer, Valkyrie, must have been her name for the operation. In Norse mythology, a Valkyrie chose who would die in battle and who would live. He continued reading the letter. I confronted him 6 weeks ago. I showed him a fraction of the proof I had gathered. I thought he would confess that we could handle it internally, save the company, and avoid scandal. I was naive. He didn't confess. He laughed. He told me it was too late. He said he had built a fail-safe. He had structured the fraud in such a way that the ultimate liability, the cooked books, the fraudulent valuations sent to the banks and the SEC, all had your digital signature on them. He had been carefully manipulating the documents you signed for years, attaching your digital credentials to fraudulent reports. He showed me. If the company went down, you wouldn't just be ruined, Marcus. You would go to prison for 20 years. He told me he was the victim, a loyal CFO who had been deceived by his charismatic, reckless CEO. The cold, calculated evil of it was breathtaking. Desmond had been setting him up for years, building a cage around him while smiling to his face. He gave me an ultimatum. The letter went on. Keep my mouth shut or he would trigger the collapse himself. Bury you and disappear with the millions he had already stolen. I was trapped. Going to the authorities meant sending you to jail. Doing nothing meant the same result, just on his timeline. I needed another way. A third option. A way to burn the whole rotten structure down, but in a way that would ultimately exonerate you. Marcus looked at the USB stick. He scrambled to her desk, found her laptop, and plugged it in. The drive contained a single file, a screen recording. He double-clicked it. It was a video of Annalise's computer screen recorded on the day she disappeared. It showed her logging into the company's high-level financial systems. It showed her accessing the account for the Cayman Islands Shell Corporation. And then it showed her initiating the transfer of $300 million. The mouse moved with a steady, deliberate hand. But the audio was the crucial part. It was a recording of a phone call placed on speaker. Desmond's voice, slick and confident, filled the room. So you're really going to do it? You're going to pull the pin on the grenade and hold on to it yourself. Bold move, Annalise. Very dramatic. Annalise's voice was calm, icy. You left me no choice, Desmond. You built a trap for Marcus. I'm just building a different one for you. This won't work, Desmond sneered. This just makes you look like a common thief. You transfer the money, you disappear. Everyone will think you and Marcus had a falling out and you decided to take revenge. It's perfect. It still buries him in the fraud and I get away clean. You're wrong, Annalise said. My transfer is clumsy. It's noisy. A single massive unauthorized transfer from my credentials to a brand new shell company. It's the work of a panicking amateur, not a master fraudster. It screams stolen money. Your fraud, Desmond, the one you were going to use to frame Marcus, is subtle, complex, years in the making. When the forensic accountants come in, and my transfer ensures they will come in with a vengeance, they will find two things. They will find my loud, messy crime. But as they dig deeper to see how this was possible, they will inevitably find your quiet, brilliant one. They will see the ghost ledger. They will see the inflated assets. And they will see that the two crimes don't match. My act creates a breadcrumb trail that will lead them directly to you. There was a pause on the recording. Desmond's confidence seemed to waver. You're bluffing. Am I? Annalise said. I'm about to become one of the most wanted white-collar criminals in the world. I'm about to give up my life, my home, my name. My husband will hate me. The world will think I'm a monster. What reason would I have to bluff? This was the only way. To burn the company to the ground before you could, to force a bankruptcy on my terms, not yours. This way there's a chance the truth will come out. Your way there was none. Marcus heard a click on the recording as she executed the transfer. It's done. Annalise said, her voice soft but final. Then she hung up. Marcus stared at the screen, tears streaming down his face. It's done. The text message. It wasn't an accusation. It was a declaration of sacrifice. Marcus sat on the floor of the study, the letter in his hands, the world tilting on its axis. The words on the page were a key, unlocking a truth so monstrous and heartbreaking that his mind struggled to grasp it. He read the final part of the letter not as a quick explanation, but as a slow, deliberate confession of love disguised as a crime. I had to disappear. Marcus. The letter continued, Annalise's script flawless, even in her presumed haste. The plan, my Valkyrie's gambit, was only ever going to work if my crime looked real. It needed to be selfish, emotional, and brutal. A scorned wife taking her pound of flesh. If I stayed, if I tried to explain, Desmond would have used his army of lawyers to discredit me, to paint me as a disgruntled, hysterical woman, or worse, your co-conspirator in the fraud. He would have drowned the truth in a sea of litigation and lies. My vanishing is the key. The missing wife, the stolen money, it's a simple, compelling story that the police and the media would latch onto. And they did. The narrative had to be about my greed, not Desmond's. It had to be about our broken marriage, not his calculated betrayal. That cloud of scandal, as painful as I knew it would be for you, was the only thing that could obscure the path I was really on. It bought the time needed for the real investigation, the one I am now entrusting to you to begin. So I played the part. I took the cash from our account enough to look like escape money, but not so much as to be untraceable. I took the jewelry you gave me, each piece a memory I had to weaponize, leaving the empty envelope on your pillow. That was perhaps the cruelest part. I needed you to be confused. I needed you to be angry. I needed your performance as the wronged, bewildered husband to be genuine because I knew they would be watching your every move. I am so sorry for that particular cruelty, my love. Forcing you into that role is a sin I will carry with me always. I have been watching the news from a series of anonymous hotel rooms using untraceable Wi-Fi. I have seen what they're saying about you, what they have made you into. Each headline, each pundit speculating on your guilt has been a knife in my heart. Every day for the last 3 weeks has been a special kind of hell, knowing I was the architect of your public humiliation. But it was necessary. You had to be the victim of my crime, so you wouldn't be the perpetrator of his. I pray you can see that now. This evidence is your weapon. The USB drive contains the recording of my final call with Desmond. It is his confession, his arrogance, his undoing. The documents in this envelope are just the beginning of the trail. I uncovered the tip of the fraudulent iceberg. Do not take this to your corporate lawyers or the board. They are compromised, worried only about their own liability and golden parachutes. They will bury it to mitigate their own losses. You must give it to someone who is looking for the truth, not just a convenient narrative. Give it to the detective. The woman with the sharp eyes, Detective Reed. She doesn't like you. In all the news clips, I see the way she looks at you. She doesn't trust you. And that Marcus is why you must trust her. She isn't impressed by your money or your tower. She is hunting for the real story, and I have just handed you the script. I don't know what will happen to me now. I am a ghost. The money I transferred is sitting in an account that I will never touch. Its only purpose was to trigger the alarms. The cash I took will allow me to live for a while, moving from place to place, always looking over my shoulder. Perhaps one day when this is all over, when your name is cleared and Desmond is where he belongs, I can find a way to come home. But I have accepted that I may not be able to. I am now Annalise Thorne, international fugitive. There may be no coming back from that. I destroyed Ethelred Innovations, the company that you loved more than anything. I know that. But I did it to save Marcus Thorne, the man I still love more than the life I just threw away. You were lost in that glass tower, my love. You were so busy conquering the world you didn't see the enemy in your own throne room. Maybe losing the kingdom is the only way to find yourself again. Don't look for me. It's too dangerous. Clear your name. And then please live. Live freely and fully. That is all I ask. Forever yours. Annalise Marcus. Let the letter fall from his numb fingers. The silence of the study pressed in thick and suffocating. He wasn't a victim of her betrayal. He was the subject of her masterpiece, a brutal, brilliant, agonizing work of art painted with the ruin of their lives. The searing hatred he had harbored for 3 weeks curdled and collapsed inward, transforming into a profound, gut-wrenching shame that bent him in two. He choked back a sob, the sound raw and ugly in the quiet room. While he had been drinking himself into a stupor, cursing her name, she had been in hiding alone, watching him on a flickering screen, praying her insane gambit would work. While he had been mourning his company, she had been mourning their entire existence. His mind suddenly cruelly replayed a highlight reel of his own failures. A flash of memory, Annalise 2 years ago, pointing at a quarterly report on his desk. This number for accounts receivable seems high, Marcus. It's grown faster than our revenue. He remembered patting her hand dismissively. Don't worry about it. It's just aggressive accounting. Desmond is a wizard with this stuff. Another memory, their last anniversary. She had booked a table at their favorite French restaurant. He'd canceled at the last minute. I'm so sorry, honey. This government deal is at a critical stage. Desmond and I have to pull an all-nighter. He hadn't been with Desmond. He'd been having drinks with Corinne, soaking in her admiration, because it was easier than facing the quiet disappointment in his own wife's eyes. Each memory was a fresh stab of guilt. He had been arrogant, complacent, and blind. He had outsourced his trust to Desmond and his heart to his work, leaving Annalise with the scraps. And in his blindness she had been forced to see for the both of them, to fight a war he didn't even know was being waged. He stumbled to his feet, his body aching but his mind blazing with a new terrible clarity. The despair of the last 3 weeks, the self-pity, it was all burned away by a cold, hard resolve. Annalise had sacrificed her queen to save a foolish king. She had passed him the torch from across a chasm of her own making. It was his turn to carry it. He walked out of the study and into the living room, past the half-empty bottle of scotch on the coffee table. He picked it up, walked it to the kitchen sink, and poured the amber liquid down the drain. The glugging sound a final mournful goodbye to the man he had been. He washed his face with cold water, staring at his reflection in the mirror above the sink. The face staring back was no longer the titan of industry. It was the face of a man who had lost everything, a fool who had been saved by the woman he had so thoroughly neglected. He dried his face, his movements now precise and purposeful. The fog had lifted. Annalise had given him his mission. He would not fail her again. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over his lawyer's number for a split second before dismissing it. Annalise was right. This was not a legal problem anymore. This was a matter of justice. He scrolled through his recent calls past the names of board members and concerned but distant friends until he found the one he was looking for. He pressed the call button for Detective Evelyn Reed. "Detective Reed," he said when she answered, his voice devoid of the arrogance or desperation she was used to. It was steady, calm, and weighted with absolute conviction. "It's Marcus Thorne. We need to talk. Immediately. I know what happened to my wife, and I can prove who is responsible for every last bit of this." Detective Reed agreed to meet him, but not at the precinct. She chose a neutral location, a small anonymous coffee shop in a neighborhood far from the gleaming towers of downtown. She was skeptical, her expression hardened by 3 weeks of what she believed were his lies. Marcus didn't waste time with pleasantries. He placed the manila envelope on the table between them. "Before you say anything, just read this. And watch this." He slid her laptop, which he'd brought across the table with the USB stick already in it. Reed hesitated, her eyes searching his for any sign of deception. She saw only a raw, weary grief and a steely determination she hadn't seen before. Intrigued, she opened the letter and began to read. Marcus watched as her expression shifted from hardened skepticism to deep concentration, then to shock. She read the letter twice, then wordlessly played the video file. The coffee shop faded away as the recorded voices of Annalise and Desmond filled the small space around their table. Reed listened intently, her head cocked. She heard Desmond's arrogant admission. She heard Annalise's calm, calculated explanation of her own plan. She heard the final chilling words, "It's done." When the recording finished, Reed was silent for a full minute, her gaze distant. She looked from the laptop back to Marcus. The suspicion in her eyes was gone, replaced by a dawning grudging respect. "My God," she breathed. "She built a better case against him than my entire department has in 3 weeks. She immolated herself to light him up. She sacrificed everything Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, on the belief that you would be smart enough to see the real pattern." Reed closed the laptop. She was all business now. "This recording the documents, this changes everything. This isn't just evidence of financial fraud. It's extortion. It establishes a clear motive for why she would stage her own disappearance. It shifts the entire focus of the investigation." The next few hours were a blur of coordinated action. Reed understood the stakes. Desmond couldn't be tipped off. She brought in a trusted team from the Financial Crimes Unit and a prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Marcus gave them a sworn statement detailing everything, holding nothing back, including his own failings as a husband and his foolish blind trust in Desmond. Armed with the new evidence and a new set of warrants, federal agents and Chicago police descended on 2 locations simultaneously: Desmond Vance's penthouse apartment and his secluded office at the now-defunct Ethelred headquarters. They found him in his office shredding documents. He had likely been spooked by Marcus's summons from Reed. When he saw the agents, he attempted to feign surprise, but the mask slipped when Reed played a portion of the audio recording for him. The color drained from his face. He knew he was caught. In his apartment, they found hard drives containing the ghost ledgers and evidence of the millions he had siphoned away, exactly as Annalise had predicted. The arrest of Desmond Vance was the new lead story. The narrative turned on a dime. The tale of the vengeful wife was replaced by the even more sensational story of the treacherous partner and the wife who engineered a multi-million-dollar corporate implosion as a brilliant, desperate act of sacrifice to save her husband. Marcus Thorne was no longer the villain. He was cleared of involvement in the fraud. The media, in its relentless way, now painted him as a tragic figure, a man betrayed by his best friend and saved by his estranged wife. But Marcus ignored the noise. The court of public opinion meant nothing to him anymore. The legal battles would be long and arduous. Investors sued. Employees launched class action lawsuits. The bankruptcy proceedings would take years to untangle. But Marcus was free. His name was cleared. Ethelred Innovations was dead, but he was alive. Weeks later, after the initial storm had passed, he was sitting in the quiet of his now-sold Lincoln Park home, packing the last of his personal belongings into boxes. He was broke, his fortune tied up in litigation, but he felt lighter than he had in years. A plain, prepaid burner phone he had bought buzzed on the table. It was a number he didn't recognize from a country code he couldn't place. He answered, his heart pounding. A text message appeared on the screen. It wasn't 2 words, but 3. "You are free." Then a second message came through. It was a single image. A picture of a quiet beach at dawn, the waves gently lapping the shore. It was a place he didn't recognize, somewhere peaceful and anonymous. There was no one in the photo, but he knew she was there. It was her way of telling him she was safe. And it was her way of saying goodbye for now. He typed back a single word. "Thank you." He didn't know if she would ever come back. He didn't know if their marriage could ever be rebuilt from the ashes. He had lost his company, his fortune, and his wife. But in losing everything, he had been given a second chance. He looked out the window, not at a skyline he owned, but at a world of unknown possibilities. Annalise had saved his life. Now it was time to finally start living it. What an incredible story of sacrifice and deception. Annalise Thorne made a choice that most of us can barely comprehend to destroy her own life, her reputation, and the empire she helped build. All for the slim chance of saving the man she loved from a trap he couldn't see. It forces us to ask some difficult questions. Is a love that requires such a devastating sacrifice truly a healthy one? Or is it the ultimate expression of devotion? Marcus Thorne lost his fortune but regained his soul. But Annalise remains a fugitive, a ghost in the system she expertly manipulated. What do you think? Was Annalise a hero, or was her solution as destructive as the problem she was trying to solve? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Millionaire takes mistress to wife's birthday party, but his pregnant wife makes a life-changing decision. A polished limousine idles outside the grand gates of the Harrington estate in Manhattan, its engine humming like an anxious heartbeat. On this crisp spring evening, a glamorous party unfolds inside, meant to celebrate the wife of multi-billionaire Alexander Harrington. Yet, as guests sip vintage champagne and gossip about the latest tabloids, a scandalous sight turns every head. The billionaire arrives not with his wife on his arm, but with a stunning young woman few recognize. Whispers ripple through the crowd, for Alexander's pregnant wife is still inside, oblivious to the social earthquake about to strike on her very own birthday. Alexander Harrington was no stranger to scandal. A charismatic entrepreneur known for his sweeping business conquests, he had always carried with him an air of insatiable ambition. The Harrington name was woven into the fabric of New York's high society. His philanthropic galas attracted major figures like Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, and even foreign dignitaries. He lived in a sprawling estate overlooking Central Park, a testament to his unimaginable wealth. For years, the public had lauded him for his confidence, generosity, and devilish smile. In private, however, there were darker rumors swirling, stories of backroom deals, hush money, and quiet heartbreaks. On the surface, Alexander's marriage to Clarissa Taylor Harrington was a picture of perfection. Clarissa, an Oxford-educated art historian, came from old money herself. Her father had bankrolled the expansions of major art museums across Europe. Photographs in the tabloids and glossy magazines featured Clarissa's radiant smile and Alexander's unwavering arm around her shoulders. They were the golden couple who seemed to have it all: the looks, the lineage, the wealth. They graced the covers of lifestyle publications, donating substantial sums to children's hospitals and educational initiatives. Clarissa often accompanied Alexander to high-stakes business meetings, proving herself as a formidable negotiator. Anyone who saw them in those early days believed they were unstoppable together. Yet success came with a cost. Before long, Alexander began to distance himself from Clarissa. He poured himself into building Harrington Global, a conglomerate that spanned tech investments, real estate, and environmental solutions. Late nights in the office, trips overseas to broker major deals, and social events that Clarissa wasn't invited to became routine. Despite her growing suspicions, Clarissa tried to remain supportive, especially when she discovered she was pregnant. She planned to surprise Alexander with the news at her upcoming birthday party, a lavish gathering where she hoped they could reconnect in front of their closest friends and family. As the big night approached, the house buzzed with preparations. Lavish flower arrangements arrived in waves, filling the mansion with the scent of white orchids and subtle honeysuckle. Crystal chandeliers were polished to a sparkling sheen. The catering team meticulously planned a 12-course meal featuring delicacies flown in from around the world. Clarissa's father, Winston Taylor, personally ensured that the guest list was curated with dignitaries, celebrities, and old family friends. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Alexander was finishing up a secret dinner at an exclusive Michelin star restaurant with a woman named Sofia de la Cruz. Sofia had entered his life barely a year ago as a marketing consultant. Young, ambitious, and undeniably captivating, she had quickly become more than just a professional acquaintance. Alexander found himself enthralled by her energy and fresh perspective. Their bond deepened behind closed doors, away from the paparazzi's watchful eyes. Like a siren's call, Sophia offered the excitement that Alexander felt he was missing. She encouraged his most extravagant desires and made him feel invincible. That night, while Clarissa went over last-minute arrangements for her birthday party, Alexander decided to invite Sophia. It was a decision born of arrogance, fueled by the high that came from believing he could control any situation. How could there be any repercussions, he reasoned. He was Alexander Harrington, after all, a man who shaped the narrative. He believed the world danced to his tune. Little did he know, the stage was set for a betrayal that would change everything. Clarissa's birthday party shimmered with the promise of a memorable evening. The estate's grand ballroom was alight with crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across the polished marble floors. Velvet draped tables were topped with elegant centerpieces of orchids, peonies, and flickering gold candles. A string quartet performed in a corner, their music weaving seamlessly through the chatter of Manhattan's elite. Clarissa, dressed in a flowing silk gown that draped delicately over her growing bump, greeted each guest with warmth. Though her pregnancy was a secret to most, the subtle curvature of her abdomen gave hints of the new life stirring within her. She planned to share the joyful announcement. That night, her father was to toast her birthday. Then she would offer the news, hoping to see the stunned but happy expression on Alexander's face. Among the attendees were several notable figures. Her father, Winston, who stood proud in a tailored navy suit, fashion icon Isabella Quinn, who had designed Clarissa's gown, real estate mogul Kenton Cross, and even the mayor of New York City, who had come to pay tribute to the Harringtons. Conversations swirled around potential deals, philanthropic endeavors, and the latest headlines. Yet, a peculiar restlessness hung in the air. It was as if the entire estate sensed an unspoken tension. About an hour into the festivities, a hush began to spread from the entrance. People craned their necks toward the foyer where Alexander had just arrived. He stood tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke tuxedo, his hair slicked back in a manner reminiscent of old Hollywood stars. But it wasn't Alexander's arrival that captured everyone's shock. It was the presence of the woman on his arm, Sofia de la Cruz, in a figure-hugging red gown that shimmered with sequins, walked with the confidence of someone who had already conquered the room. Heads turned as she stepped forward, her lips curved in a self-assured smirk. She seemed well aware of the spotlight that fell upon her. Though many recognized her from social media posts and marketing conferences, they struggled to comprehend why she was here at Clarissa's birthday celebration, especially in such an intimate capacity. Confusion and whispers rippled among the guests. Some glanced toward Clarissa, who, from across the room, locked eyes with her husband. Her smile faltered, her breath caught in her throat. She froze momentarily, gripping the stem of her champagne flute so tightly that it nearly shattered. The unthinkable had happened. Alexander had not only chosen to bring Sophia to the party, he had done so brazenly, in full public view. Clarissa felt her cheeks flush with a blend of rage and humiliation. This was supposed to be her special night, and she had spent weeks meticulously organizing every detail. The sting was unbearable. Before she could fully process her shock, Winston hurried to her side, quietly asking what was going on. She shook her head, unable to offer an answer. Alexander attempted to mask any awkwardness with a broad, confident grin. He guided Sophia deeper into the ballroom as though nothing was amiss. Some guests, loyal to Clarissa, turned away in disgust or disapproval. Others, ever the opportunists, flocked to greet the new arrival, eager to glean inside information. Moments later, a hush once again fell over the crowd as Alexander approached Clarissa. They stood face to face. Sophia hovered just behind him like a sinister shadow. "Happy birthday, darling," Alexander said, leaning in to place a perfunctory kiss on Clarissa's cheek. His words felt as cold as the tension they generated. The air crackled. An uncertain hush befell the entire ballroom. Clarissa's emotions collided, anger, hurt, and betrayal swirling into a perfect storm. She felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to allow them to fall. Not here, not surrounded by these people. Summoning the composure that had been drilled into her since birth, she merely nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her voice tight. Alexander stepped aside, and Sophia stepped forward, offering a polite, "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Clarissa. I've heard so much about you." Clarissa could barely bring herself to respond. "Likewise," she managed, a single word laced with tension. Though outwardly the exchange appeared cordial, everyone in proximity sensed the electric undertones. Clarissa's father, feeling his daughter's silent plea, quickly took the microphone to begin the evening's formal toasts. The dinner was about to begin, and beneath the veneer of elegant conversation and polished smiles, a storm of betrayal brewed. The banquet hall glowed under candlelight, each course served by a fleet of uniformed waitstaff moving with practiced precision. Crystal glasses tinkled softly as servers poured top-shelf wine. Guests engaged in polite chit-chat at the round tables, though their eyes often wandered back to the triangle forming among Clarissa, Alexander, and Sophia. Clarissa sat at the head table, flanked by Winston on one side and Alexander on the other. Sophia was positioned uncomfortably close, just a seat away from Alexander. The arrangement had been made long before the identity of Alexander's guest had been revealed. Clarissa's mother had assumed Alexander would bring a business associate or perhaps a friend, never suspecting the truth. Tension hung thick in the air. Clarissa struggled to keep her posture upright, silently pleading for the night to pass quickly. She could feel the soft flutter of her baby within her, a gentle reminder of the delicate life she was fighting to protect. She forced a smile every time a guest raised a toast to her. Inside, however, her thoughts raced. Why did Alexander do this? How could he be so cruel? Halfway through dinner, Winston rose from his seat to give a formal birthday speech for his daughter. By then, a hush fell over the chatter as everyone turned their attention to the proud father. I have watched my daughter grow from a curious, determined child into a beautiful, accomplished woman, Winston began, his voice filled with affection. She has brought light into this family with her passion for art, her compassionate heart, and her unwavering loyalty. Tonight, I want to raise a toast to Clarissa, who has never ceased to amaze me. Happy birthday, my dear. Applause reverberated around the room, but Clarissa found herself trembling. She had planned to make her big announcement during the speech's aftermath, but the presence of Sophia made her question everything. Should she still reveal her pregnancy now? Should she keep it secret a while longer? Her internal debate was cut short when Winston nodded for Clarissa to stand. Summoning her courage, she placed a hand over her tummy, the other gripping her champagne flute. A trembling breath escaped her lips. Thank you, Father, and thank you all for being here tonight. 1. I have a little surprise to share with everyone. She paused, scanning the room. Her gaze landed on Alexander, whose expression was unreadable. Sophia was watching intently, almost hungrily, like a spectator waiting for the next act of a play. Clarissa mustered her composure and announced, I'm expecting a baby. Alexander and I are going to have our first child. A collective gasp filled the air, followed by applause from well-wishers. Many guests, unaware of the undercurrents, rose to congratulate her. Winston embraced his daughter, tears glistening in his proud eyes. Alexander, for his part, feigned a smile. He leaned over to Clarissa and brushed a quick kiss on her cheek, whispering, You might have told me sooner. It was a cutting remark, delivered in the presence of dozens of curious onlookers. Clarissa's heart clenched. She had expected a look of joy, or at least a flicker of genuine excitement, but all she found was mild annoyance. Even so, she endured the subsequent flood of well-wishers, politely accepting their hugs and handshakes. Meanwhile, she caught glimpses of Sophia's face, which remained surprisingly composed. There was no overt jealousy or shock, just an eerie calm that sent chills down Clarissa's spine. When dessert was served, a decadent 3-tier chocolate confection, the festive atmosphere had dimmed. Clarissa attempted to maintain conversations with guests, but found her mind drifting. She watched Alexander and Sophia from the corner of her eye, noticing how often he leaned toward her, whispering in her ear, and how she laughed quietly in return. It felt as though Clarissa had been cast as a minor character in her own celebration. The humiliation was impossible to ignore, yet beneath her hurt lay an unexpected ripple of resolve. This is my child, and I will not let Alexander's reckless behavior overshadow that. She pressed a hand against her still-growing belly. One thing was becoming clear: her future and her babies could no longer rest solely in Alexander's hands. After dinner, guests mingled in the expansive lounge area, sipping espresso and enjoying after-dinner liqueurs. A jazz ensemble took the stage, their smooth melodies drifting through the corridors. Several high-profile attendees began to make discreet exits, though many lingered, perhaps hoping to witness whatever spectacle might unfold. Clarissa stood near the grand fireplace, its crackling flames offering fleeting warmth in a room that felt increasingly cold. She was trying to console herself with small talk alongside her longtime friend, Isabella Quinn. Isabella, a notable fashion designer, had been privy to Clarissa's suspicions for months. She knew how desperately Clarissa had clung to the hope of restoring her marriage. Now, the sight of Sophia's brazen presence threatened to shatter Clarissa's composure. "How are you holding up?" Isabella asked softly, her eyes flicking to Alexander across the room. Clarissa swallowed hard. "I'm not sure. I feel humiliated, but also strangely liberated." Isabella nodded. "He's really crossed a line. You deserve better." Before Clarissa could reply, Alexander approached them, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Darling," he said, placing a cursory hand on Clarissa's shoulder. "I'm going to step outside to talk business for a moment. Kenton Cross wants to discuss a venture." Clarissa eyed him warily. "Are you sure it's just business?" Alexander scowled. "Don't start, Clarissa. Not now." He turned on his heel, leaving Clarissa with Isabella, her question unanswered. Clarissa felt a surge of anger at his dismissiveness. In front of dozens of guests and the press, he had effectively shoved aside her feelings on her own birthday. Minutes later, Clarissa noticed Sophia slip through a side door that led toward the garden terrace. Curiosity and a growing sense of indignation fueled her to follow. She excused herself from Isabella and made her way through the throng of guests, slipping out into the cool night air. The garden was beautifully landscaped, accented by floodlights illuminating carefully trimmed hedges. Statues of Greek deities stood silent guard amidst the greenery. Clarissa found Sophia near a stone bench, scrolling through her phone with a smug grin. "So," Clarissa began, her voice barely above a whisper, "you decided to come to my birthday party on the arm of my husband. Bold choice." Sophia glanced up. Instead of surprise or guilt, she merely offered a pitying smile. "Alexander insisted I come. He said it was important for us to be seen together." Clarissa felt the urge to snap back, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Tell me, does it bother you at all that he's married and expecting a child?" Sophia tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry if this hurts you, but Alexander and I, we have something real. He made it clear your relationship was falling apart. I never thought you'd be pregnant." Clarissa's pulse pounded in her ears. She wondered how long Alexander had carried on these lies, painting her as some distant, loveless wife. Every syllable from Sophia's mouth fed Clarissa's fury. "Did he tell you that I was distant because he was never home?" Clarissa fired back, her voice shaking. "That I stopped trusting him because he kept secrets? You may think you have something real, but let me tell you, Alexander's version of truth is as malleable as clay." Sophia's expression hardened. "He's different with me. I'm not here to fight you, Clarissa. I just came because he asked me to." A sudden wave of nausea swelled within Clarissa, anger and heartbreak roiling together. She pressed a hand over her belly, inhaling slowly to calm herself. The last thing she wanted was to faint or cause a scene that might harm her baby. "No, you're not here to fight," Clarissa said. "But you're playing a dangerous game. Remember, the man who cheats with you can cheat on you just as easily." Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but the tension was shattered by the sound of footsteps. They both turned to see Winston stepping into the garden, worry etched across his features. "Clarissa, are you all right?" Clarissa straightened her posture. "I'm fine, Father." The older man looked between Clarissa and Sophia, quickly piecing together the confrontation in progress. Though he kept his tone neutral, there was a coldness in Winston's eyes as he addressed Sophia. "Miss Dela Cruz, if you'll excuse us, I'd like a moment alone with my daughter." Sophia hesitated, then gracefully slid past them and back into the mansion. Once she was gone, Winston took Clarissa's hand. "This is unacceptable," he murmured. "I won't stand by and watch my daughter be humiliated." Clarissa exhaled, a tear finally escaping down her cheek. "I know. But I need time to think, Father. I have to decide what's best for me and the baby." Winston pulled her into a gentle embrace, the garden's stillness enveloping them. "I'll support whatever decision you make." And as the moonlight bathed them in its glow, Clarissa realized she was at a crossroads. One path led back inside to Alexander, to their marriage, to the heartbreak. The other path remained uncertain, but it offered a hope for dignity and independence that she had nearly forgotten was possible. Long after most guests had gone home, the Harrington estate finally settled into an uneasy silence. The staff busied themselves cleaning up the remnants of the lavish party, collecting empty champagne flutes and disposing of flower arrangements that had begun to wilt under the harsh light. Clarissa retreated to her bedroom suite, feeling a lifetime older than she had at the start of the night. She slipped off her silk gown, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. The curve of her stomach was more noticeable now that she no longer wore a loose dress. She ran her hand across her abdomen, feeling the comforting presence of her unborn child. "Is this how I want to raise you?" she thought, "in a household where your father disrespects me so openly?" Down the hall, the door to Alexander's study was slightly ajar. Light spilled into the corridor, accompanied by the faint aroma of whiskey. Clarissa took a deep breath and walked toward it, determined to confront him, but also to keep her emotions in check. She found Alexander behind his massive mahogany desk, staring at his computer screen. He looked up when she entered. "Clarissa," he greeted, though his voice lacked warmth. She closed the door quietly behind her. "What you did tonight was humiliating," she began, her voice a subdued tremor. "On my birthday, of all days, you bring her here?" Alexander rubbed his temples, exhaling. "Look, I'm sorry it had to happen this way. But you've known our relationship has been strained for a long time. Sophia is part of my life now." Clarissa bristled. "And I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." A flicker of guilt flickered in his eyes, then vanished. "I know that," he said tersely, "but you've made no attempt to support me in my ventures. You constantly criticize my absences, my business expansions, my choices." Clarissa stared at him in disbelief. "Because you constantly push me away. Every time I try to meet you halfway, you vanish on another business trip or stay out late with no explanation. Do you even hear yourself?" He rose from his chair, circling the desk to stand before her. She realized how tired he looked, shadows beneath his eyes betraying a man under pressure. Yet sympathy was hard to muster when she remembered Sophia's smug presence. "I'm under tremendous stress," Alexander said, pacing the length of the room. "We're finalizing an international deal with the Saudis. I have a board meeting next week that could make or break the new technology division. And now we have a baby on the way, something you didn't even tell me until you announced it to everyone tonight." Clarissa's anger flared again. "I planned to tell you privately, but you've been avoiding me for weeks. We barely share a meal, let alone a meaningful conversation." Alexander rested his hands on the back of an ornate chair, letting out a long breath. "I can't do this right now." She studied him for a moment, then said softly, "If you won't choose to be a husband and father, then I'll make a choice for myself and this child." Her words hung in the air like a distant thunderclap. Alexander frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Clarissa said, her voice firmer now, "I'm considering leaving. I can't endure this spectacle. Not for me, and not for our baby." Alexander's face paled, though she couldn't tell if it was from fear or anger. He opened his mouth as if to respond, then closed it again. In the silence that followed, Clarissa realized she had made her decision. She would not allow herself to be paraded around like a trophy wife while he flaunted his affair in her face. Without waiting for his reply, she turned on her heel and left the study. Her steps echoed in the corridor, each one a resolute stride toward whatever future she would create away from this toxic environment. In her bedroom, Clarissa shut the door and rested her back against it. She felt a swirl of emotions, sadness, anger, fear, but also an unexpected sense of freedom. She was done pretending everything was fine, done playing the role of the compliant wife while her husband publicly undermined her. Tomorrow, the press would likely run scandalous headlines. Social media might explode with speculation, but tonight, as she placed a protective hand over her unborn child, Clarissa felt a calm resolve she would not be defined by Alexander's betrayal. She would forge her own path, even if she had to go through heartbreak to find it. The next morning arrived with a clamor of news vans outside the estate's gates. Word had leaked from the party, perhaps from a staff member or an opportunistic guest, about the shocking drama. A billionaire husband bringing his mistress to his pregnant wife's birthday celebration. Journalists scrambled to piece together the story, hungry for exclusive interviews or even a single photograph that captured the tension. Clarissa awoke to the sounds of muffled shouting below her window. She peered through the curtains and saw a small crowd of reporters, cameras at the ready. Her heart sank at the spectacle. She had grown up under the public's gaze, but never had she felt so exposed, so vulnerable. She prepared herself for the day with steady determination. Slipping into a comfortable yet elegant maternity dress, she summoned the household staff and informed them. She would handle any necessary statements herself. She then called her personal lawyer, Margaret Lee, a formidable mind in family law. "Margaret," Clarissa said when the call connected, "I need your advice. Things have gotten complicated. Alexander has openly brought another woman into our marriage, and I need to protect myself and my baby." Margaret's calm voice offered reassurance. "We can discuss your options: prenups, child custody, financial support, property division. The media storm will be intense, but we can manage it. Do you want me to come over?" "Yes, please." Clarissa exhaled. "I'd like to figure out the best course of action sooner rather than later." Alexander, meanwhile, had already left the estate for his office, avoiding the reporters gathered outside. Clarissa suspected he'd do damage control from behind a conference table, likely spinning a narrative that made him appear the victim of marital discord. His statement would undoubtedly gloss over his blatant betrayal, focusing instead on their incompatibilities. Clarissa was determined not to be caught off guard by his rhetoric. By mid-morning, Margaret Lee arrived, carefully navigating her way through the reporters. She was a short, impeccably dressed woman who exuded both warmth and steely resolve. They sat together in the sunlit parlor, far from prying ears. "Clarissa, the first question is, do you intend to remain married?" Margaret asked, pulling out a notepad. Clarissa took a long moment to consider. Memories flashed through her mind: her wedding day, the joy they once shared, the nights spent discussing dreams for the future, and the gradual drift into secrecy and lies. Finally, she shook her head. "I can't see a way forward with Alexander. He's made it clear he's invested in someone else. I won't subject myself or my child to that kind of instability." Margaret nodded, jotting notes. "Understood. In that case, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and mental cruelty. Your prenuptial agreement does entitle you to significant assets, but we need to ensure Alexander can't manipulate his financials." Clarissa's hand rested protectively over her abdomen. "And the baby? I want to make sure custody is clarified." Margaret's lips curved into a sympathetic smile. "We'll arrange for shared custody, though you can request primary custody if you can prove it's in the child's best interest." Given Alexander's public behavior, it shouldn't be too difficult. They spent the next hour outlining a plan, reviewing documents, and strategizing how to handle the inevitable media onslaught. Winston joined them midway, offering both emotional support and financial resources. Clarissa felt a surge of gratitude for her father's unwavering presence. Despite everything, she was not alone. As Margaret departed, Clarissa steeled herself to face the reporters outside. She stepped out onto the front steps of the estate, her father by her side. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Microphones jostled for position as frenzied voices called out her name. Clarissa raised a hand for silence. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice shaking slightly before she steadied it. "I would prefer privacy during this difficult time. However, I understand there are questions. All I can say is that Alexander Harrington and I are dealing with personal matters, and my primary concern is the well-being of my unborn child. "Are you divorcing Mr. Harrington?" a reporter shouted. Clarissa paused, meeting the cacophony of eyes and lenses head-on. "I'm consulting with my legal counsel regarding all available options. That's all I can share for now." She turned to leave, ignoring the avalanche of follow-up questions. Though her heart pounded, she felt a newfound sense of courage. This was the beginning of her own narrative one, where she would no longer be overshadowed by Alexander's towering presence. Inside the estate, a staff member closed the doors behind her. Clarissa's resolve crystallized. She would stand firm, not just for herself, but for the little life growing within her. The drama had only begun, but Clarissa was ready to fight for her future. Across town, in the Harrington Global headquarters, Alexander paced his corner office, phone pressed to his ear. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline, but his attention was laser-focused on the crisis at hand. "You promised me this merger would go smoothly," he barked into the phone. "Now the board is panicking because of the media circus around my personal life. I need a statement from PR immediately." On the other end of the line was Harrington Global's chief communications officer, a man named Bradley Swain. He attempted to maintain professionalism despite Alexander's aggressive tone. "We have a draft statement ready to go. However, I strongly advise a unified approach with your spouse. The tabloids are having a field day with the rumors." Alexander exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Clarissa's not cooperating. She's consulting her own lawyers and refusing to speak with me." Bradley's hesitation was evident. "With all due respect, if you and Miss S. Harrington appear combative, it could harm the company's public image even more. The board wants stability." Alexander slammed a fist onto his desk. "If the board is so concerned, they can remember how much Harrington Global owes to my leadership. Get the statement ready." He hung up abruptly and sank into his leather chair. His reflection in the polished surface of the desk stared back at him, a man who prided himself on control, now embroiled in a scandal that was spiraling out of his hands. His phone buzzed with incoming texts, presumably from Sophia and from other acquaintances wanting clarity or, worse, gossip. Just then, Kenton Cross knocked on the open door. A long-time associate in real estate, Kenton had been invited to the birthday party fiasco and had witnessed the meltdown firsthand. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You've really stirred the pot this time, Alexander," Kenton remarked, seating himself across from the desk. "The business community is whispering about whether you can handle your personal life, let alone these billion-dollar deals." Alexander bristled. "I know how to manage my personal affairs. The tabloids will move on once something else catches their attention." Kenton folded his arms, eyeing Alexander critically. "And your wife? She looks serious about taking the baby and walking away. You stand to lose a lot if you don't handle this diplomatically." Alexander's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that? I've been poring over the prenup. My lawyers assure me we have options." Kenton shook his head. "But is a nasty legal battle worth it? The public loves Clarissa. She's philanthropic, well-spoken, practically royalty in certain circles. If she plays the sympathy card, you'll be painted as the callous husband who flaunted his mistress. You might win the merger, but you'll lose the court of public opinion, and that can hurt your bottom line in the long run." Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose again, feeling a headache bloom behind his eyes. "So what do you suggest?" "Speak to her," Kenton replied evenly. "Come to an arrangement. Maybe it's time you realize that salvaging your reputation is more critical than stroking your ego." Alexander glared at him, but said nothing. Deep down, he knew Kenton was right. His entire empire was built on public trust, stakeholder confidence, and the allure of success. The scandal was tarnishing that aura. Stocks had already dipped slightly, and rumors swirled of potential investors pulling out. After Kenton left, Alexander's phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophia. He stared at the screen, weighing whether to answer. Finally, he picked up. "What do you need?" he asked curtly. Sophia's voice was soft. "I'm worried about you. The media is hounding me too. People are calling me a home wrecker, saying all sorts of things online." He sighed heavily. "It'll blow over. Don't respond to them." There was a brief pause. "And us? Where do we stand if Clarissa files for divorce?" Alexander's mind reeled. He pictured his future, either losing massive chunks of his estate in a bitter divorce or fighting Clarissa in court. Neither option seemed appealing. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I need time to think." He ended the call without a proper goodbye, tossing his phone onto the desk. For the first time in a long while, he felt uncertain, cornered. The carefully curated life he'd built was crumbling, his company threatened by rumor, his marriage on the brink, and his mistress already demanding reassurances. The unstoppable Alexander Harrington was suddenly at a loss. Yet even in this low moment, a flicker of stubborn pride coursed through him. He hadn't fought his way to the top to be taken down by gossip and scandal. "I can handle this," he told himself. "I'll do whatever it takes to come out on top." Over the following week, the media frenzy grew to epic proportions. Magazine covers screamed headlines like "Harrington's Double Life" and "Billionaire's Mistress Crashes." "Pregnant Wife's Birthday." Talk shows dissected every available crumb of information, inviting body language experts to analyze clips from the birthday party. Social media lit up with hashtags pitting #Team Clarissa against #Team Alexander, although the vast majority appeared to rally around Clarissa. Feeling cornered, Alexander's PR team issued a formal statement: "Mr. and Miss S. Harrington are committed to resolving their private matters amicably and appreciate the public's understanding during this personal transition." The statement, however, did little to quell the speculation. Rumors surfaced that Clarissa was preparing to file for divorce citing adultery, which carried heavy implications for Alexander's standing in certain conservative business circles. Clarissa maintained a dignified silence, refusing interviews. She entrusted her father Winston to handle any urgent press inquiries, while her lawyer Margaret readied the necessary legal documents. The Harrington estate turned into a fortress, gates closed, security heightened, and staff under strict instructions to turn away all outsiders. Still, life had to continue. Clarissa, who once curated art shows, found herself diving into a new project, a children's arts charity event, something she hoped to do in honor of her baby. She threw herself into philanthropic efforts as a way to cope with her emotional turmoil. Each day brought fresh heartbreak whenever she remembered the betrayal, but she also felt a growing excitement about her future as a mother. Isabella Quinn paid frequent visits, offering both creative input on the charity event and emotional support. Together, they scouted venues, reached out to sponsors, and began planning a gala that would bring attention to arts programs for underprivileged youth. Clarissa found a renewed sense of purpose in this project. She might have lost faith in her marriage, but she still believed in making the world a better place. Meanwhile, Alexander fought on the business front. The prospective merger he'd been touting was now at risk. Foreign investors hesitated to link their brand with a man drowning in scandal. Even so, he soldiered on with negotiations, offering sweetened terms and personal guarantees. He also hired a high-powered legal team to mount a defense in the likely divorce proceedings. His lawyers tried various tactics, sending documents that questioned Clarissa's mental state, insinuating she might be unstable due to pregnancy hormones. It was a ruthless strategy designed to protect Alexander's assets and hamper her claims in court. When Clarissa received those documents, she felt physically ill. The insinuation that she was mentally compromised due to pregnancy was more than just an insult. It was a direct threat to her credibility as a prospective mother. Margaret quickly drafted a sharp rebuttal, warning Alexander's team that any further slander would be met with defamation suits. In quieter moments, Clarissa felt the weight of it all. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night, tears silently streaming down her cheeks as she grieved the happy future she once envisioned with Alexander. But each time, she reminded herself of the new life growing inside her, the gentle flutters that reminded her she was no longer alone. That simple fact fueled her resolve. On day 8 of the media onslaught, Clarissa received a personal phone call from an unexpected ally, Catherine Lyons, a renowned talk show host with a reputation for championing women's rights. Clarissa answered hesitantly. "Clarissa," Catherine said in a soothing tone, "I'd like to invite you for an interview, no gimmicks. Just a chance for you to speak your truth, if you're ready." Clarissa hesitated. Part of her wanted to remain silent, to guard her privacy. But the other part, a growing part, recognized that telling her side of the story might turn the tide in her favor, and possibly set the record straight about her pregnancy, her plans, and her dignity. "I'll consider it," Clarissa answered. "Give me some time." She ended the call, realizing she stood at another crossroads. A public interview could be a powerful weapon in this media war, a chance to reveal Alexander's manipulations without stooping to his legal team's level. Yet it also meant exposing her vulnerabilities before millions of viewers. As she paced the grand foyer of the Harrington estate, Clarissa gently rested a hand on her belly. "Whatever path I choose," she whispered to her child, "I promise it'll be one that leads us to a life of love and respect." And so the battle lines were drawn. Alexander might have commanded armies of lawyers and PR experts, but Clarissa had discovered a deeper strength within herself. The stage was set for the next crucial act of their unfolding drama, the moment she would decide whether to stand in the public eye and reclaim her narrative or stay quiet and let the scandal define her. Clarissa ultimately accepted Catherine Lyons' invitation. The idea of publicly exposing her pain both terrified and intrigued her. But the potential benefits were clear. The chance to correct the rumor mill, to assert her agency, and to make known her intentions for her child's future. After consulting with Margaret and Winston, she agreed to a carefully orchestrated, sit-down interview in a private, tasteful setting, a neutral location that felt neither intrusive nor contrived. On the evening of the interview, Clarissa arrived at Catherine's production studio, which had been converted into a warm, living room-like set. Soft lighting framed 2 comfortable armchairs positioned opposite one another. A small floral arrangement and a table with glasses of water separated them. Off-camera, a minimal crew whispered final adjustments, ensuring the microphone levels were correct and the cameras were rolling smoothly. Catherine greeted Clarissa with a warm hug, whispering, "Remember, you're in control. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, just say so." Clarissa nodded. She took a steadying breath and settled into her chair, clad in a modest, elegant dress. She appeared every bit the poised socialite, except for the vulnerability in her eyes, which revealed the depth of her turmoil. Once the countdown ended, Catherine opened the interview. "Good evening. Tonight, I'm joined by Clarissa Taylor Harrington, who's found herself in the eye of a media storm involving her marriage to billionaire Alexander Harrington. Clarissa, thank you for being here." Clarissa offered a polite smile. "Thank you for having me, Catherine." Catherine leaned in with genuine concern. "You've remained largely silent since the reports emerged of Alexander's affair. Why choose to speak now?" Clarissa folded her hands in her lap, exhaling slowly. "This past week has been overwhelming. I've been hounded by paparazzi, and my family's privacy has been invaded. But I've also realized that silence allows others to control the narrative. I want people to understand that I am not just Alexander Harrington's wife. I am my own person, and I have my own story." Catherine nodded, leaning forward. I understand you're expecting your first child with Alexander. How has that impacted your decisions? A gentle hand drifted to Clarissa's stomach. Enormously. Becoming a mother changed my perspective on what I'm willing to endure. I realized I can't raise my child in a home filled with deceit. That's not the environment I want for them. Catherine's gaze was sympathetic. What do you say to those who argue that marital problems should be resolved in private? Clarissa's voice trembled slightly. Normally I'd agree. But when someone brings their mistress to your birthday party in front of hundreds of guests, it's no longer a private matter. It's humiliating, and it forces you to respond. And the media, well, they thrive on sensational stories. Catherine's tone turned more serious. The rumor mill suggests you're seeking divorce. Is that true? A flicker of emotion crossed Clarissa's face. Yes, I'm filing for divorce. I have to protect myself and my child. Alexander's affair. It isn't the only problem we've had, but it's the final straw. The studio fell silent as the gravity of her words settled. Catherine glanced at her notes, then chose her next question carefully. There have been allegations from Alexander's legal team that you're emotionally unstable due to your pregnancy. How do you respond? Clarissa's eyes hardened. I'm not surprised. Unfortunately, that's a common tactic to discredit women, especially pregnant women. I'm under a doctor's care, and I'm perfectly capable of making rational decisions. If anything, pregnancy has made me more clear about what I want in life. Catherine nodded, then leaned back with a soft smile. What do you envision for your future and your child's? For a moment, Clarissa's features softened. I want a peaceful life, filled with love, where my child can grow up knowing respect and kindness. I plan to continue my philanthropic work, especially with children's art programs, and I hope that my child will one day be proud of the person I've become. The interview concluded on a reflective note, with Catherine praising Clarissa's courage. Thank you for your honesty and vulnerability tonight. I'm sure your story will resonate with many who faced similar betrayals. Clarissa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since the scandal broke, she felt free, having shared her truth on her own terms. The cameras powered down, and Catherine stood to hug her again, whispering, "You are amazing. Stay strong." By the time Clarissa emerged from the studio, she found Winston waiting for her. He gently took her arm. "Proud of you, my girl," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Clarissa managed a weak smile. "This is the beginning, isn't it?" Winston nodded, guiding her toward the waiting car. "Yes, but at least now, you're writing your own story." She climbed into the vehicle, gazing out at the city lights. Somewhere in the labyrinth of skyscrapers stood Alexander, likely watching the interview and scrambling for his next move. But for Clarissa, the course was set. No longer a silent victim, she embraced this new chapter with resolve. Whatever awaited, she wouldn't face it as the timid wife overshadowed by her husband's arrogance. She was a mother-to-be, fighting for her child's future with every ounce of courage she had. Alexander did indeed watch the interview from his penthouse apartment. The crisp, modern furnishings offered little comfort as Clarissa's words sank in. She had confirmed the divorce publicly, exposing his affair in a calm, dignified manner that made him seem like a heartless villain. His phone vibrated incessantly with texts and calls, business partners, board members, friends, and even Sophia. He finally answered Sophia's call. "Did you watch it?" he asked, voice taut. "I did," Sophia replied. "It's not good for you, Alexander. Public sympathy is with Clarissa. Everyone's calling her a brave mother-to-be, and you're." She trailed off, as if reluctant to finish the sentence. Alexander ground his teeth. "I'm what, Sophia?" she sighed. "You're the unfaithful billionaire. Social media is destroying you. The board might oust you if the stocks continue to dip." A hot flush of panic coursed through Alexander, though he struggled to maintain composure. I can't be ousted from my own company. I control the majority shares. Yes, but if confidence in you drops enough, they might find a way. You've made some enemies on the board over the years. Alexander inhaled sharply, recalling the tense board meetings where he'd forced through expansions, ignoring cautionary advice. Perhaps those resentments now had fertile ground to grow. So you're saying I should apologize publicly? Backtrack? Sophia hesitated. Maybe. Or paint Clarissa as manipulative. If you let her narrative stand uncontested, you'll lose. You need to fight back. The idea churned in Alexander's gut. His pride rebelled against apologizing, but he also feared the destructive potential of Clarissa's public image. I'll speak with my PR team, he said curtly, ending the call. Within an hour, Alexander convened an emergency meeting with Bradley Swain and a team of crisis management experts. They sat around his long glass table, laptops open, phone lines buzzing. Mr. Harrington, Bradley began, clearing his throat. The interview has galvanized public support for Clarissa. She's being hailed as a role model for women standing up against infidelity. We need to refocus the narrative on your business achievements, your philanthropic efforts. Remind people who you are outside of this scandal. One of the crisis managers chimed in. Alternatively, we can release a counter-statement accusing Miss S. Harrington of withholding the pregnancy from you, arguing she used it as leverage. That angle might shift some blame her way. Alexander scowled, recalling how Clarissa had tried to inform him, but was met with his own negligence. That might be thin, he muttered, though desperation flickered in his eyes. But we can't just let her run away with this. Bradley hesitated, then spoke softly. Alexander, maybe you need to consider a genuine apology. Public contrition could do wonders. A show of remorse. A vow to continue supporting Clarissa and the child financially, no matter what. Alexander's pride warred with the rational part of his mind. He loathed the thought of appearing weak. Apologies were for those who admitted they were wrong, and in his eyes, Clarissa bore some responsibility for the breakdown of their marriage. But the alternative, an all-out battle, might irreparably damage his empire. Draft a statement, he finally conceded, tension visible in his clenched jaw. Frame it as me regretting how events unfolded, reaffirm my commitment to the child, and mention I hope Clarissa and I can come to amicable terms. Bradley nodded, relief evident on his face. We'll have it ready by morning. As the team filed out, Alexander remained in his chair, staring at the city lights. Amicable terms, he thought, recalling the legal documents accusing Clarissa of emotional instability. Those had been his lawyer's idea, but he hadn't protested. He knew it would likely anger her further. How did it all come to this? His mind drifted to memories of Clarissa, once bright, playful, engaging. Their early dates in Paris, spontaneous trips to the Caribbean, and dinners where they'd talk late into the night about their shared dreams. He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment their relationship frayed. Perhaps it had been a series of small betrayals, neglected conversations, growing distances. Now, they stood at opposite ends of a public battlefield, neither willing to yield. A heavy sigh escaped him. For the first time, a small voice inside whispered that perhaps Clarissa wasn't the only one hurting. He pictured her face during the interview, sad, determined, and undeniably pregnant with his child. But the fleeting remorse clashed with anger. Her going public felt like an ambush, leaving him cornered. He pushed down whatever empathy he'd felt and resolved to win, no matter the cost. If Clarissa wanted war, he'd fight with every tool at his disposal. Days turned into another week. Clarissa's interview aired worldwide, generating impassioned debates. Donations to her charity soared, while Alexander's once gleaming reputation took blow after blow. Stockholders of Harrington Global expressed discomfort in private meetings, and rumors persisted that the board was exploring contingencies should Alexander's public image compromise the company's stability. Clarissa remained sequestered at the estate, focusing on her health and the charity event. Despite the hailstorm of sensational headlines, she found pockets of peace reading, journaling, painting. She even began designing a nursery, selecting soft pastel hues and whimsical animal murals, determined to provide a nurturing environment for her child. Alexander, however, escalated his counteroffensive. His lawyers filed motions claiming Clarissa had deliberately withheld news of her pregnancy to manipulate him. He declined a direct interview but released a video statement where he appeared remorseful yet subtly blamed marital discord on Clarissa's lack of supportive understanding of his business pressures. The statement earned mixed reactions. Some found it sincere, others labeled it damage control. Late one afternoon, Clarissa heard the echo of raised voices downstairs. She emerged from her room to see Winston arguing with a man in a tailored suit, one of Alexander's lawyers. Margaret Lee stood close by, her expression mirroring Winston's anger. "Clarissa, they've come to serve you additional papers," Margaret explained, exasperation in her voice. "They're pushing for an urgent hearing on spousal support and property claims." Clarissa stiffened. "Is Alexander here?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrington is not present. He simply sent me to deliver these documents." Clarissa accepted the paperwork, scanning the legal jargon that essentially questioned her entitlement to portions of the estate, claiming she abandoned the marriage. It also criticized her for public defamation, claiming that the interview painted Alexander in a damaging light. She felt her blood run cold. "That's enough," Winston growled, turning to the lawyer. "You can leave now. Any further communication goes through Miss Lee." The lawyer bowed stiffly and departed. Clarissa closed the door behind him, heart pounding like thunder in her chest. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "He's not letting up." Margaret placed a reassuring hand on Clarissa's shoulder. "We anticipated this. We'll fight it." Later that evening, Clarissa locked herself in her bedroom. She gazed at the city skyline outside her window, tears finally overtaking her composure. The weight of the baby in her womb felt both comforting and terrifying. Her child was counting on her to provide stability and security. Yet Alexander's relentless legal maneuvers threatened everything she was trying to build. In that moment, she made another life-changing decision. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years, an old family connection in England, who owned a country estate far from the paparazzi's reach. The phone rang and a familiar voice answered. "Aunt Rosalind," Clarissa said, her voice trembling. "I need a place to stay, somewhere I can clear my head. Is your guest cottage still available?" Her aunt's warm reply was immediate. "Of course, my dear. Come as soon as you wish." Clarissa ended the call, a surge of relief coursing through her. If Alexander wanted to wage war, fine, but she wouldn't remain a sitting target. She would remove herself from the toxic environment, cross an ocean if she had to, and focus on her child's well-being. The estate in England was secluded, nestled in lush countryside, the perfect retreat where she could gather her strength and prepare for the final battles to come. She spent the rest of the evening making arrangements, instructing Margaret on how to handle any urgent legal matters in her absence, coordinating with Winston to keep an eye on the estate, and packing essentials for the journey. A strange calm took hold of her as she placed each folded maternity garment into her suitcase. She was no longer passively reacting to Alexander's betrayals. She was charting her own course. At midnight, Clarissa stood by the nursery she'd only just begun to decorate, her heart squeezed with bittersweet emotion. "We'll come back," she whispered to the unborn child. "But for now, we need a safe haven." She left the nursery lights off, gently closing the door behind her. A new chapter awaited, one that would test her resilience, her capacity for healing, and her willingness to protect what truly mattered. Regardless of Alexander's tactics, Clarissa was determined that neither she nor her child would live in the shadows of his ego and deception ever again. Clarissa's departure from New York was quiet, shrouded in secrecy to avoid the press. A private car whisked her to a discreet gate at the airport, where she boarded a small jet bound for England. The aircraft hummed gently as it rose above the city lights, each twinkle below her growing distant until the skyline was nothing more than a memory. The flight offered time for reflection. In the silent cocoon of the cabin, she flipped through photographs of her and Alexander from years past. Their wedding day, two beaming faces full of hope, honeymoon snapshots in Santorini, laughter and golden sunsets. Snapshots of philanthropic galas where they stood arm in arm. Each image felt like a relic from another era, proof that once they had shared something precious. Where did it all go wrong, she wondered, though the question no longer carried the same sting. She was moving forward. Answers might never come, and that was acceptable. By dawn, the plane touched down on the fog-veiled runway of a private airfield in England. Waiting for her was Aunt Rosalind, a regal woman in her 60s, with streaks of silver in her hair. She enveloped Clarissa in a warm embrace the moment they met on the tarmac. "My darling girl," she murmured, "you've been through so much." Clarissa felt tears threaten to spill. "I need some time away from all of it." Hand in hand, they climbed into a vintage Bentley that carried them through rolling hills, past grazing sheep and stone cottages. Eventually, they arrived at a sprawling countryside manor, Aunt Rosalind's ancestral home. Clarissa was shown to a quaint guest cottage with ivy climbing its walls, flower boxes brimming with lavender, and a little pond nestled behind it, surrounded by willow trees. It was a world apart from the opulence of the Harrington estate, yet just as enchanting in its own right. Over the next few days, Clarissa settled into a gentle routine, morning walks through dew-kissed fields, afternoons sipping tea with Aunt Rosalind, and evenings reading by the fire. The relentless hammering of paparazzi and the digital storm of social media felt a million miles away. She checked in with Margaret daily, learning that Alexander's legal team was livid about her disappearance, but there was little they could do. Legally, she was free to travel. Winston reported that the media had calmed somewhat, disappointed to find no further drama at the Harrington estate. One drizzly afternoon, as Clarissa lounged in a cushioned window seat, she felt a firm little kick inside her belly. She smiled, placing a hand over the spot. "You're going to be strong," she whispered. "Stronger than I ever was." In that moment, she realized how much she had changed in just a matter of weeks. No longer the hesitant wife striving to keep up appearances, she felt a quiet power blooming inside her, a determination to create a life of peace and integrity for her child. Occasionally, her mind drifted to Alexander. She'd wonder if he regretted his actions, if he missed her, or if he was merely strategizing his next business move. But those thoughts no longer twisted her heart in knots. The pain had dulled into a distant ache, a sign of healing. She might have loved him once, but she loved her child more fiercely than anything else. It was that love that propelled her onward. Aunt Rosalind's estate became a sanctuary for introspection, a place where Clarissa could nurture both her pregnancy and her spirit. Each day her belly grew, and with it, her resolve solidified like the ancient stones in the manor walls. She would finalize the divorce on her own terms, ensure her child's future was secure, and continue her philanthropic passion. If Alexander wanted to remain locked in his cycle of ambition and scandal, that was his choice. Sitting by the pond one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in lilac and gold, Clarissa exhaled softly. The reflections of the willow trees rippled on the water's surface, reminding her of life's impermanence. She couldn't control what had happened, but she could shape what would come next. As twilight fell, she returned to the cottage, heart lightened, ready to face the final notes of her confrontation with Alexander whenever that day would come. For now, she found solace in the hush of the English countryside, every breath affirming her newfound independence, and the life growing inside her both delicate and immensely strong. Outside a quiet English manor, beneath a sky of lavender and gold, Clarissa has finally found a sanctuary for herself and for the child she carries. Though her journey began in heartbreak and betrayal, it transformed into a testament of courage, self-discovery, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Still, the world watches, waiting to see if Alexander Harrington will repent, retaliate, or relinquish the empire he fought so hard to build. In the meantime, Clarissa holds fast to her hopes for a future defined by love, integrity, and resilience. Will this billionaire's betrayal spark a revolution in Clarissa's life? Or will old wounds heal into a fragile truce?